what I'm going to do is, since many of you are familiar with the South American record, I'm going to move straight into the skeletal record. If we could go through the next series of slides until we come to the human skeletal material. If we could move through these transparencies until we come to the human skeletal section. And I'll just make a few concluding comments about the archaeology. The archaeological record from the Eastern Pacific Rim allows few generalizations to be made about the colonization of the Americas. The oldest acceptable dated sites found in coastal environment settings come from Daisy Cave, Arlington Springs, California, and Quabra, Hawaii, Peru. The earliest evidence for maritime adaptation occurs between 11,000 and 11,500 years ago, and there is little commonality in the artifact inventories from site to site. This is not surprising, however, given that the small number of early sites that have been carefully investigated and the enormous environmental resource diversity found along the length of the coast. The record for maritime adaptation appears to represent a variety of separate adaptations to coastal settings. Evidence for nearby sites in the interior are older than coastal sites. It is quite probable that the earliest evidence for coastal adaptation in the Americas has yet to be found. During the last maximum sea level, 18,000 years ago, sea level went down 120 meters, 360 feet. What is known about Pleistocene age sites in maritime settings has come from the investigations of localities that occur in active areas of tectonic uplift. The rate of sea level rise is an important factor in considering dispersal patterns of maritime adapted people. A recent sea level record that was taken off of the coast of Vietnam documents rapid flooding of the Sunda Shelf. And the Sunda Shelf area sea level curve has been established, and it's divided into 4 parts. Between 19,000 and 14,600 years ago, sea level rose moderately from 114 meters to 96 meters at a rate of 1/10 of a meter per 100 years. Between I got a doubled up sentence here. Between 14.6 and 14,300 years ago, sea level rose from 96 to 80 meters at a rate of 5.3 meters per 100 years, which is an astronomical record. There was another spike at between 12 and 11,000 years ago with fewer data points, in which the rise was 8 meters in 700 years. So we have a situation then whereby sea level drowned in excess of 2 million square miles in Southeast Asia. If there were maritime adapted peoples in Southeast Asia, this would have destabilized those people. All right, so the skeletal, we want to go on through those. We want to go back to the faces. Wonderful. Well, that was what the skeletal biologists are telling us. In effect, it's the earliest North American record, and the earliest South American record is producing skeletons that look different than modern day peoples. This is a reconstruction of the Wizard Beach man from Nevada that's been dated at about 9,400 years old. Next. If you could move straight to the, maybe I got 2 more minutes, so I'm going to just cut to the bottom line, and if we could go transparencies to the new model. What Gentry, Steele, and I have done is that we have compiled a summary of the major propositions that can be put together for combining both the archaeological and the skeletal evidence. And I'll just rapidly read through these points, which I think will be appearing. Anyway, their argument, the skeletal biology points to Southeast Asia. This is an Ainu boat. This is just an example. The diversity in the early North and South American archaeological and skeletal samples unequivocally reflect a great complexity and indicate the peopling of the Americas, and the subsequent history was more complex than previously thought. This forces us to cast the net more broadly in cause and sources to explain this diversity and the complexity of the American record. On the basis of the data that is now available, a few key propositions for an expanded Pacific Rim model extends from Australia to Terra del Fuego can be presented. This extended view is prompted by the inadequacy of ice-free corridor as the sole entry route for the earliest populations. Populations from Northeast Asia did not exclusively occupy the Americas. Groups from Northeast Asia and colonizations from south of Siberia could represent discrete population events. The Pacific Rim coastal entry route hypothesis should be expanded from the current focus on Northeast Asia and the Americas to also include Central and South Pacific areas. Maritime adapted boat using peoples from south of Siberia moved along the Pacific Rim to the Americas during late Pleistocene times, possibly more than 30,000 years ago. Regional diversity in maritime adaptive patterns along the eastern Pacific Rim can be inferred from archaeological sites dating between 12,000 and 11,000 years ago. The ice-free corridor route can only accommodate a very late entry colonization event. The Pacific Rim route can accommodate colonization events during the glacial maximum from about 21,000 to 15,000 years ago. Early North American human remains have been shown to be different than later remains. Asian populations south of Siberia can be distinguished from North Asians on the basis of their cranial facial morphology. Also, this is supported by dental distinctions between the two regions. Both North and South American Paleo-Indian populations differ in similar ways from more recent Native American populations. South American Paleo-Indian populations appear to share structural similarities with Australian populations. North American Paleo-Indian populations do not appear to share similarities with Australian populations to the same extent as do South American populations. Late Pleistocene and early Holocene North American and South American skeletal remains are distinguished from one another. Both North and South American skeletal samples indicate there was more regional diversity at this early time than previously expected, and the North American populations appear to show more regional diversity than the South American populations. So very quickly, we think that the archaeological record is telling us about regional adaptations. We think the genetic record is primarily telling us about people that came out of Northeast Asia. We think that the skeletal record is telling us about people that came from south of Siberia along the Pacific Rim. Thank you.
Y creo que tenemos tiempo para dos preguntas breves, por favor. Me parece que todo quedó muy claro, ¿no? Bueno, gracias, Rob.